All's my life I had to fight. All's my life hard times
Hey y'all, my name is Diola.
Hi everyone, my name is Precious.
And I'm Irene. So we're the ones organizing this year's virtual Black History Month event. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about how Black History Month came about. So, can you tell us a bit about Black History Month?
The idea of dedicating a time frame to celebrating Black history was first introduced by Carter G. Woodson. Carter G. Woodson was an American historian who designated the first week in February to be celebrated as Black History Month.
In 1970, the Black United Students of Kent State University held the first celebration for Black History Month.
Yeah, so even though we often think of Canada as a more progressive counterpart to the United States, Canada was actually much later in recognizing Black History Month than the US. The concept was first officially recognized in 1979 by the Ontario Black History Society, and so that group of people petitioned the city of Toronto to make Black History Month official in 1979.
We've talked a bit about Black history, so what does the present look like for Black Canadians?
Yeah, so right now what a lot of people don't know is that most Canadians who are Black in this country right now are not first-generation immigrants. They're actually second-generation immigrants, and most of our parents come from places like the Caribbean or Jamaica, but for the most part, the Black people who are here today are second-generation African immigrants from countries like Nigeria, which is where we're all from, and Rwanda, Ghana, South Africa, and that's where...
I realized that, at least when I first came to Canada, a lot of people had this whole stereotype of how Africans are poor, when in reality that is not true at all. Africans are not poor. In fact, we are very blessed and malnourished as a country. We have many resources and materials that many countries are jealous of and try to take. So in all honesty, I don't even know where such a stereotype came from, because Africans are very cultural and very welcoming people.
Like, with every place you go to, there's always the rich and there's always the poor. Same thing as here, for example. There's the rich, there's the poor.
Because a lot of times people think that the only right way for people to live is to live up to the Western ideals of wealth and a nice house and nice cars. But in Africa, the values are more community-centered. So a lot of times, like in places like Nigeria, we consider our families and our communities to be very important rather than ourselves as individuals. So our own living conditions aren't as important as the living conditions of all the people around us.
Can we talk a little bit about the Black Lives Matter protest?
Yeah, of course. But Precious and I were both there back in June, and it was so great to see how supportive the community is of our goals. But it is important to note that there is a huge majority of people that are in step with our goals and our ideas, and that want to see meaningful change and that want to see justice brought to those who violate the Black experience.
And even though I couldn't be there, just hearing about how people were planning to get together and like how passionate people were to like meet together and fight for the movement, it was really beautiful, honestly.
It's heart touching. And it was honestly awesome to know that it was organized by
one of the people we know.
It was organized by a girl named KG as well as a friend of hers, so that was really awesome that youths were taking initiative to organize such an event.
Whatever future we have is going to come from us. So it's very important that we start taking the steps right now to make the change that we want to see in the future.
And can we also talk about how BLM was not a trend?
Oh,
it's a part of our lives. Like, let's talk about it. I'm not Black just during BLM protests.
It's every day.
I'm Black every single day since the day I was born.
Imagine how, if it was tiring for you, imagine how tiring it would be for us to be Black all
every
the time.
Single day.
To experience this kind of thing every day. So it's important to know that even though Black Lives Matter isn't as much of a trend now, it's still a part of people's lives, and it's still something we need to talk about.
And we all need to continue striving to have a society that is equal and recognize Black people as humans, not cultural pieces.
And let's also talk about how racism isn't something that only occurs in the United States. Because I remember last year someone came to me and we were talking about the movement, and they said, doesn't racism only happen in U.S.? Racism, although it's not as prevalent as it is in U.S., it still exists in Canada. Also within the Black community itself, with colorism and other social factors like that.
It does hurt a lot when people say things like racism doesn't exist in Canada, because I have personally experienced racism, and it does not feel good. It doesn't make me feel like I'm an accepted member of the community. So it's important not to erase that kind of experience that Black Canadians experience all the time.
And racism can also happen in different ways. It's not just necessarily saying the N-word to a Black person that could be a racist thing. Little things like comments you make that maybe it's a form of ignorance in a way. Like, you don't mean to. Like, that's not your intention.
It still
but
hurts.
yeah.
One thing that I know all of us have experienced is people asking, "Can I touch your hair?"
Oh, I cannot with that. I cannot with that.
Because when you do that, it's like you're treating that black person as someone from a zoo, like an animal where you can just go look at them and inspect and admire.
And
Once
like
again, you're not
touch.
treating them like a person, but as an item where you can just go admire. And once you're done, you don't have to deal with them anymore.
And also, let's not ask, is that your real hair? So like,
Because even if it isn't my real hair, it's none of
not
your
your
business.
business.
It
Like,
really is
period.
none of your business.
Exactly.
Oh, can I touch it?
No.
Would you like me to touch your hair?
We've invited some other Black students at Westwood to share their experiences with us today. Guys, can you go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Ride. I'm in grade 12 and I'm Nigerian.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I'm in grade 12 and I'm Nigerian.
Hi, I'm Riobo, I'm also Nigerian, and I'm in grade 11.
So already, being Black means that we face social discrimination that makes it more likely for us to experience the onset of mental health issues and mental illness.
There's a kind of stereotype against Black people. If a Black person goes to a hospital, and there's also a white person next to them, even though a Black person might be in critical care, might need critical care at that moment, you're least likely to get admitted first because there's a stereotype that Black people are supposed to be strong in a way.
We all remember during the COVID-19 pandemic last year, as well as when the George Floyd thing took place. Yeah, so during that time, even schools didn't realize that, wow, maybe our Black students need to take time off. Maybe we need to send messages that could help to improve the mental health of Black students, because during that time, Black students were facing very, very serious and difficult things that one should not go through on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Black people do, especially in the healthcare industry, there's a lot of stereotyping and a lot of pre-perception that Black people are stronger or more able to handle pain than their white counterparts. I mean, up until the 60s, it was a very widely accepted theory that Black people had thicker skin than white people in the medical community. And even up till today, there are some medical professionals who haven't shaken themselves of this belief.
Do you guys know who Henrietta Lacks is?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I first heard about her from Ms. Dot, and she had cancer, but the thing is that the cancer cells didn't stop multiplying. So they still use her cells for research to this day, and they don't give any credit or anything back to her or her family.
Yeah, and it's especially relevant now that the COVID vaccine is starting to get distributed, because you'll notice that within Black communities, there's a much higher apprehension for getting this vaccine. And the reason behind that is that back in the 70s, there were experiments done primarily on Black men in the South, infecting them with syphilis to see what the progression of the disease is like. And these men were told that they were getting a cure for syphilis or a preventative syphilis treatment. And it wasn't until later that it was acknowledged that, hey, doctors and researchers were infecting Black men with syphilis intentionally and using them as lab rats, essentially, in order to continue their research. And this is the root of a lot of the fear and apprehension behind getting the COVID vaccine in a lot of Black circles and communities.
It's led to a lot of apprehensiveness in the community, so it makes it harder for Black people to approach help when it's needed. And I think it creates this vicious cycle of is there even a point of me going to seek out help? Even if I go to seek out this help, is it going to be offered to me in a way that's fair?
So a lot of the stereotypes and the socialization that has been inflicted upon Black people has also been internalized by Black people. So in a lot of ways, our parents and our grandparents feel that they have to be stronger because they've been told that they have to be stronger. And they feel that they have to be independent because they've been told that they have to be independent by white messaging and by white media. And we should have the privilege of being vulnerable and needing help like every other person. So let's move on to the conversation about cultural appropriation of Black culture and Black expression in general.
It's actually a very serious topic that needs more awareness, because right now, due to the internet and the accessibility of different languages and cultures, we realize that AAVE, African American Vernacular English, is spreading and being used rapidly by different races, and no one tries to give credits back to Black people. They just imitate it, no credits, use it, and once again, discard it. AAV is turned into something that those of other races can put on, use, and then when they're no longer in spaces where they need it, they immediately discard it and go back to talking in your normal, proper accent. So
any country you would consider foreign, anything that's not basically Americanized in a way, is kind of funny to most people now. For example, the culture of Black people are kind of a joke now. The way they speak, the way they act, the way they dress is kind of like a joke worth imitating, like a source of laughter in a way, which is not okay with me because because back home, when we go home, our parents speak this way. This is where we came from at the end of the day. So seeing it become a source of like laughter and something that can be like pushed aside and just like made a joke, it's just not okay.
Then when you have other people, non-people of color, using AAVE, they use it as a source of humor. They use it to entertain, to make themselves seem funnier and more hilarious, disregarding the fact that African American vernacular is a way of speaking, that people use that it's an actual dialect and it's a part of an actual culture. So by turning it into a source of entertainment and then marketing it and commercializing it, using it to sell products, using it to make money, honestly, and to create a career off of it, completely discredits the fact that it's a whole dialect and there's a whole culture behind it. The way that African American vernacular has been integrated into slang, that when you use AAVE, people are like, oh, well, you can't say that, it's just slang now. So I think that complete like ignorance, completely ignoring the fact that, like, again, it's a whole culture, and that really, this is a little bit controversial, but Black people really are the source of pop culture, and we do not get any credit. Slang is just AAVE in a different color. That's really what it is. So I feel like when people attack us for not being offended that, like, they're using AAVE or they're using it in the wrong context, or the worst one is where they claim it as their own, and they try to pawn it off as, like, this is what Gen Z created, invalidates a whole culture behind it, and it makes us seem like we're being over emotional and we're being too sensitive, because the things that we get made fun of, they get praised for.
And let's talk about hair. Our hair is considered weird when we do it, yet when white people do it, it's kind of something considered cool, even though it's cultural appropriation. And what makes me mad the most is not just them taking the style, it's them claiming it as their own, because it really is not your own.
A lot of us, when either immigrants or people that were born here have longer traditional names that we had to shorten and adapt to be able to allow Westerners and the people here to be able to pronounce it comfortably. And I feel like that in itself kind of takes away from our character, because that is our name, and we had to change it completely in order for them to comfortably address us, you know? And I feel like that in its own is kind of like a diminishing effect, because really, if I spoke in my accent in school, people would claim they didn't understand me, even if I'm speaking perfect English. I'm speaking the same thing that I would usually say, except not in this accent as I'm speaking now. And it's diminishing in a way that if you cannot apply yourself to be able to have even the slightest bit of understanding to where we're coming from and the cultures and the language in which we speak, and yet you feel comfortable enough to take those same cultures, appropriate them, and then rename them and rebrand them and be able to distribute them as your own, is a really, really offensive fact.
Like, my name actually isn't pronounced Rede. That's not even my full name. I don't go by my full name, but like my parents call me like a shortened version of my full name. But like Rede is like, it's non-existent in my household. Like, nobody calls me Rede in my house. They either call me by like by Radika or by Rade, and then that's it. But I felt like when I got to school, I had to like change it because people were saying like, oh, it's too hard. But I don't like that, to be honest. So, like, I made like the decision, like, once I leave high school and I'm done, I'm just gonna go like by my name, by what people in my house would call me.
I think that's really important. Like, being able to share stories helps people understand that, like, this isn't an experience limited to people just in America. Like, not only Black Americans experience racism or discrimination on a level that's normally, like, you know, advertised to us. And I think that understanding is really important. I felt really insecure about my race. And I think it's because like of that lack of representation. We never see ourselves in the media. So we never get to understand that like there is beauty in who we are, that there's importance in who we are, and we are valuable even with our skin color. And I think that people like do not really understand the importance of that. Like being able to go to the store and look for toys and see yourself in that. And me and my little brother, we go to the park a lot. And this one time we went to the park, and I think I was about like 11 years old and my brother was about 7. I was old enough to understand that like racism was a problem and that some people just genuinely would not like me because of my skin color. But I was still young enough at that point to not understand like why that happens and to not understand like where this deeply rooted hate could come from. So my little brother was playing with one of his friends, and next thing you know, his mom is calling this, like the mom of that child is calling the child over and is saying that that child couldn't play with my little brother because my little brother was black. At that time, my little brother is 7 years old. He is completely harmless. So that's when I realized that like that really and truly some people just will not like you because of the color of your skin. And I think that's a harsh fact that a lot of us as young black people have to face at a young age, that we're forced to grow up so quickly and understand that like we are at a disadvantage because of our race, that we have to go through things that other people don't have to go through because of our race. And we're constantly being put in a position where sometimes bad things will happen to you, not because it's something that you caused, but just because you were born the way that you were born. So at 12 years old, didn't really understand why a woman would tell her young child not to play with my little brother. So I was put in a position where I had to tell my little brother that like, it's not your fault. Like, for lack of a better word, but it's not your fault for being born black, but like it's not your fault for somebody else feeling like they couldn't be around you because you're a black person. That I had to explain to my 7-year-old brother that like that his race, it's not a burden. Like even I at that point, like I didn't believe that my race wasn't a burden. I always felt like it was. So having to be put in that position to uplift someone when you yourself aren't even uplifted, it's where the problem really starts.
When I first came to Canada, I came in grade 5, entering grade 6 in that like summer period. So when I first came, I felt like as a young kid coming from Nigeria that I was really excited to see my new classmates and to experience different things that I hadn't experienced before. I still felt segregated from my classmates because as soon as I came, the black kids in the class made friends with me pretty easily, and I felt separated from the rest of my classmates that weren't black, that didn't associate with me as much. And I found it harder to fit in with everybody else than my other schools back in Nigeria, where everybody was from similar backgrounds and similar places and similar things like that. And I feel like to be able to feel such a segregation at such a young age speaks a lot about the community here and how kids are raised in general. Because when parents have those certain views about new people, about immigrants from any other country, they impose it on their kids as well. And those kids unknowingly are able to act on those views that their parents had. So whether they knew it or not, it still made me feel separated in a class where I thought I would come in and I would be accepted and everything would be fine. And my parents were put in a position to explain to me that it wasn't my fault that I wasn't making friends as quickly, or it wasn't my fault that only the black kids would talk to me as much unless we were put in like a class project where I had to work with other people. And I feel like they didn't recognize that I felt alienated from the rest of the class because they thought it was just like a normal thing for them.
When I came here, my parents didn't tell me that I was going to be hated for my skin. I didn't know that. I came here and basically I had to teach myself that in a way. I had to learn to love myself because that's not something our parents necessarily grew up with, so they don't understand. And in a way, to this day, they don't exactly understand or see it from our point of view. So in a way, although we're facing it and we're trying to grow and learn from everything we've gone through, we're also in a way educating them because they don't understand what goes on.
From the time I moved to Fort Mac up until like the maybe 7th, maybe even 8th grade, I did not bring, like I barely bring Nigerian food to school. Like even the basic things like rice, I didn't bring it because I was scared like people would like make snide remarks about like, why does it look like that? Why does it smell like that? And I hated it so much that I just didn't bring it. I wouldn't eat throughout school and I would just like stay there, just like do nothing because I didn't want to be made fun of for the food I ate at home.
But I've noticed that other cultures, I feel like it needs to be an education in school, or like families just need to start teaching that even if you do not know something about one culture, the way you go about it should be respectful. No matter if it's weird or foreign to you, you shouldn't mock it or make fun of it, because I've never made fun of another culture. So why is it okay for you to make fun of mine?
Yeah.
In conclusion, to wrap this whole thing up, just treat us like human beings, please.
Period.
That's all we ask. Treat us with respect. That's all we want from you. And it should not be that hard of a thing to do. If you're a
Don't say
good
the N-word if you're not black.
Literally, respect Black lives, respect Black children, and respect Black futures. That's